Most people think growing an Airbnb business is about picking the right couch or writing a clever listing title. But the truth is, the tools you use behind the scenes is actually what drives your success. Today, I'm breaking down the exact 12 tools that I use to run my Airbnb business that consistently brings in over $100,000 a month without burning out. So whether you're managing your first property or scaling to 10 or more, these tools will save you time, increase your revenue, and protect your sanity. All right, so jumping right in, I put these tools into a couple different categories. First one up here is going to be top tier essentials. Okay, these are ones that you absolutely need to have. First is going to be Price Labs, and Price Labs is going to do a couple different things for you. First things first, it is going to be dynamic pricing that's going to automatically adjust your nightly rates based off of demand. And this is what hotels use. But ultimately, what we're trying to do here is when you have really high demand dates in your market, this is where we're jacking up the price automatically so we can capture the highest average nightly rate. And then when you have lower demand, this is where we're dropping it, sometimes all the way to the floor because it's low demand in order to help get the highest occupancy during those dates. And it's a combination of the occupancy and the ADR, which is going to give you the maximum revenue. So all in all, just a massive revenue boost, when we do that compared to if you had like a flat pricing, based off of all of your nights, or even if you had a flat price for your weekdays and a flat price for your weekends. All right. And then just in general, this is going to be essential for scaling because ultimately, there's a couple pieces to Price Labs. The first one is obviously what your nightly rate is, but then the second one is going to be all of your customizations. And this is where we could change like your length of stay requirements. Do we make people book 2 nights or 3 nights or 4 nights? This is going to be like your orphan gaps, so if you have a 1-night gap, meaning Thursday and Saturday are booked, how can we treat Friday differently in order to give that the best chance of getting booked? This is also where we can incorporate, weekly and monthly discounts and charge extra for X amount of guests, over a certain number that are coming to your home. So, this is something that, yes, it needs constant attention for the pricing aspect of it and what your nightly rates are. But this is also something where we can come up with a really good set of customizations and then just repeat them for your next couple properties. All right, software number 2 is Guesty. And Guesty is going to be an all-in-one platform to manage multiple listings and platforms. So what does this mean? This means, if you have 3, 4, 5 properties, you can put them all into Guesty and have one app and one central messaging system that you can use for all of your portfolio. But then also for multiple platforms, this is where we can easily launch to not only Airbnb, but we can get on Vrbo and Booking.com and Expedia and Hopper and Home2Go. And, there's probably like 30 or 40 different platforms that Guesty can easily push to with just a click of a button. And then that way you don't have separate logins for each platform. It can all be managed out of one central location. Guesty also lets you bring in your team. So you can add cleaners inside Guesty, and you can add virtual assistants, and you can add your hot tub and pool maintenance guys, and you can give them all kinds of different access. You can add your CPA in there to go in and pull your financials. So rather than, you needing to download all these reports and handle all this communication, we could just add team members into Guesty, provide them their own logins, their own access, help them get it set up once, and then allow them to go in and get the information that they need. And then another bullet point on that is it centralizes automations, which is probably, my favorite thing about Guesty. And automations are really where we can get things dialed in and help eliminate 90% of all guest communication. So automated messages would be like your check-in instructions and your checkout instructions and booking confirmations and things like that. And Airbnb does have their own set of these. But if you're on multiple platforms, they won't fire off of Vrbo and Booking.com bookings. You'll need to manually do those. But then number 2 is we can really get dialed in based off the type of the reservation that guest made. My automations are going to be different if it's a 1-night stay versus a week-long stay. They're also going to be different if they book right now to stay tonight versus if they book now to stay in a month. So Guesty really lets us get dialed with how we're setting our automations, which is ultimately, one of the biggest things if you're managing multiple properties and dealing with multiple guests at one time. And then it also integrates well with your other systems. So the other platforms that we'll talk about here in a moment, you can all link these through API keys and make them talk to each other, which will then, make you more hands-off within your management. All right, and then last top tier essential is going to be Turno. So Turno is going to be a platform for you to manage and find new cleaners. So when you first launch your property, you can use Turno to ultimately find good Airbnb cleaners in that market. And then you can add them to your team, and it's going to ultimately automate, the scheduling. So you don't need to text them saying, hey, we have, 2 checkouts today at these addresses. Are you going to be there? They're already going to be there. It's also going to allow them to prioritize their schedule throughout their day. So let's say you have 3 Airbnbs and you have the same cleaners. Well, if one of them has a same day check-in, meaning you've got a guest leaving at 10 and a guest checking in at 4, it's going to automatically send that cleaner to that property first, and then they can go to your other 2 properties that don't require the same day turn afterwards. You can also implement checklists. So if you have certain things about your property that are not going to be just standard cleaning items, you can implement additional checklists, and you can make them mandatory and even make your cleaners upload pictures before they end that project and get paid. I like to be really specific. I don't like to make these checklists large. I really only do the things that, I would not expect a cleaner to be able to handle or remember every time. One instance for this is I've got a movie theater and the screen often needs recalibrated. So that's like definitely a one-off thing about this property. But rather than my guest messaging me every time asking how to calibrate it because it's really out of focus, I just have my cleaners do that, every single turn. And then they take a picture of it, confirm it's focused, and then that helps eliminate guest questions. And then you can also add additional members for quality control. So if you have like a QC guy, if you get a portfolio of, 8, 9, 10 properties, you might have just one individual that you want to send around and have him do like a weekly check-in at every property. Well, he can have his own checklist and his own scheduling and his own logins to Turno, and it will automate that SOP to make sure that your quality is holding up. And ultimately, Turno is going to protect your reviews because it's going to help you make sure that everything is cleaned and ready for the next guests. And then it just really simplifies the turnover. I mean, automating your cleaning process so you are not constantly messaging your cleaners is just going to, take hours and hours a week off of your plate because, the software is going to be handling it for you. All right, so next here, moving on to high impact tactical tools. First one here is going to be AirDNA. AirDNA is going to be a research tool, and this is going to give us market and property level data to analyze deals. So anytime I am buying a new property, a lot of times I will start with AirDNA to see, where the best properties are in a market and how much they're making and what amenities do they have and, how big are they and are they in a certain zip code or close to certain attractions. This is really the starting point for research, when I'm working on a new deal. This can be used for acquisitions and property upgrades. So if I have a property that's running fine, but let's say I've got a little extra budget that I want to reinvest into that property, I can jump back on AirDNA and check out, what amenities does my competition have? How are their designs? And what can I do differently and be intentional on this upgrade to continue to stay on top and beat out the competition? And this is just going to give you real-time comparables and revenue projections. The key with this here is if the data is good. There's a lot of bad data on AirDNA, so you really need to know how to sift through that and find the good properties that are producing, actual comps and actual revenue projections. Once you've sifted through the good data, then this is going to be useful information. All right, next here is going to be Truvy, or this is rebranded from Superhog, if you've heard of Superhog before. But Truvy is going to be a guest identity verification and damage insurance. So the identity verification is basically, having the guest confirm who they are. This is less relevant if you're only on Airbnb, but if you're pushing to some of these other platforms, like we talked about when you're using Guesty, like Booking.com and Home2Go are probably the 2 ones where it's most important for me. This is important because I've dealt with fraud before, and some of these other platforms do not offer the same protection and verification process that Airbnb does. This also offers damage insurance too. So it comes with either $500 security deposit that the guest leaves, or a $500 damage waiver that they pay $35 for, and then it'll cover $500 in incidentals. So this can also be good for primarily I'm running, stained sheets and stained towels, maybe broken glasses from my kitchen through this. And that way I don't need to submit all of my claims directly through Airbnb. it gives me a third-party platform that I can have confidence in that, it's not suppressing my listing every time I want to submit for a reimbursement. And yeah, again, it just adds a layer of protection that Airbnb doesn't offer. And again, Airbnb for the most part is fine. It's a lot of times these other platforms, once you start to branch out to, that this, identity verification and damage insurance really helps kick in and protect you. All right, next here is ChatGPT. So what I use ChatGPT for is first listing copy. So when I am writing a new listing, I don't want to just describe, my listing description and the title. I want to be super intentional about how I'm talking and who I'm talking to in that title and description. So what I'll do is I'll use AI to help me determine who is my ideal avatar, meaning who is the type of guest that's going to pay the most amount of money to stay at my property. And then I will use AI, once we know who that person is, to write this copy and be super intentional about calling those types of people out. For instance, if I know the guests who are going to pay the most amount of money is going to be family reunions, my listing copy and my title and the words that I use is going to be very different than if it's bachelorette parties. So AI can really help get that dialed in. Guest messaging. So this is another thing. So we talked about the automations that Guesty can provide and how dialed we can get in there and how that can really help avoid 90% of all guest questions and communication. Well, that's got to start somewhere, and they need to be organized if we want to get the most out of them. So what I'll do is I will brain dump everything that I want in my check-in instructions in ChatGPT and then say, hey, rearrange this so it communicates and relays everything I need, but also simplifies it so the guest actually reads it, understands it, and then doesn't need to ask any follow-up questions. And then ChatGPT can also help with SOP creation. So again, if you have, let's say a virtual assistant that you're having help manage your portfolio and, you need to create an SOP, again, brain dump everything into ChatGPT and make it clear and obvious for them as they're reading through that on how they can complete their job. Same thing with your cleaners and your checklists and your quality control person if you've got one. Another thing I use ChatGPT for is replying to problem guests or when guests do have an issue. Let's say a guest is all fired up because of XYZ when they checked in. I'll just screenshot that response that they just sent me, plug it in ChatGPT and say, hey, help me cool this guest down a little bit, minimize the damage, and, brainstorm a solution for them. And you'd be really surprised at how good these messages can, come back. And then we could use that to respond and help still try and get a 5-star review or get the guest to not leave a review. All right, and then last in here is RankBreeze. So RankBreeze is a software that you could sign up for and link your Airbnb listing to once you're live, and it's going to help track your search rankings. So it's going to tell you, hey, for this weekend and next weekend and the following weekend, here's where your property ranks amongst all of the competition. And it can recommend actionable changes to boost visibility. Maybe it's going to tell you, hey, try changing your title, lower your pricing, your cleaning fees too high, your description is too long, things like that. And every week, this will update and you can continue to go back and then further develop your listing. And then you can actually see what changes you made and how that will impact your visibility. And this is just going to help you stay competitive within your search results. All right, and next here, moving on down to smart enhancements. So first here is going to be Minute. Minute's going to be a software that you can use to monitor your noise levels and your guest occupancy. This is going to be the number one party preventer for me, even better than my security cameras. Because once your Minute noise detectors are really dialed in, you're only getting a notification on your phone when you know there's a potential issue. Compared to your cameras, you're going to get a notification every single time someone goes in and out of the house. So these let us get really specific. And, we could set different noise levels depending on what time of the night it is. During quiet hours, I need to be more strict, versus, during the day. Same thing with guest occupancy. This will monitor how many guests are connected to your Wi-Fi, and it'll shoot you a little alert if that, guest occupancy is over the amount of guests that booked that reservation. So again, this is just the number one preventer for parties. And, this will notify me prior to things getting out of control. And then, of course, like my neighbors getting disturbed. That's my number one concern, especially in my urban markets where I have neighbors that are close by, is, upsetting these neighbors. And this is just going to ultimately help you enforce your house rules discreetly, right? These are little noise sensors. And a lot of times I try and hide them in my properties. My favorite place is on top of my kitchen cabinets. I will place them literally on top of the cabinet, so the guests would have to get up on a ladder to even see it, and they're not even going to know that it's there. I do disclose in my listing that we have them, but I don't want to put them out in the open because they look kind of cool, and I've seen, the guests will a lot of times be curious and pull them off the mounting plate and mess with them. All right, next year is going to be security cameras. Personally, I use the cameras Blink, and these only go on the exteriors. I think the most important pieces to cover are going to be your backyard, because this is ultimately going to allow you to monitor and enforce your quiet hours. A lot of times if your guests are being loud, it is because they are in the backyard. And then secondly, your parking area, right? So again, a lot of times if things are getting out of hand, there's going to be an excess amount of cars. So if I can get one camera to capture maybe my front door and my parking pad, this is going to allow me to have eyes on, who's coming into the property and again, how many people are there. That's also going to be helpful for, if the guests were to ever dispute anything or package delivery or just safety on your overall property. I would say these are less common than me just monitoring quiet hours and making sure the guests are being respectful to my house and my neighborhood. But still, this does come into mind. And then this will just give you peace of mind without being invasive, right? So, you don't need to go and check up on the property or drive by it. These are especially helpful if you're managing remote. You can get good eyes on the property just from your cell phone. Next year's Ecobee. So this is going to be a smart thermostat that's going to help you save energy. It's going to allow you to remotely control temperatures and set limits. So we can reset these actually every day, because some guests will go in and, drive your air conditioning down to 60 degrees, right? But, come a certain time, we need to reset that back to a normal temperature. Another thing too is remotely controlling temperatures. You can actually jump on and help troubleshoot. So if a guest has issues, if you don't have a smart thermostat and they say it's hot in the house, well, now you got to go through all this discovery or maybe get them on the phone. Okay, how hot is it? When was the last time, the system ran? Is it running right now? What's the temperature set to? I could just jump on my app and see at any of my properties, answer those questions immediately, and then help them either troubleshoot or maybe go ahead and ping my maintenance guy to head over to the property if there actually is an issue. And this is just ultimately going to help you cut down on your utility bills over time. Again, if you're managing remote, or even if you're not managing remote, who knows if the guest is going to leave that AC running after they check out. And by automatically resetting these, it's going to lower how much money you're spending on your utility cost. All right. And then lastly here in the smart enhancements is going to be Schlage Smart Locks. And this one's, wildly important. This is going to automate your guest check-ins with unique codes. So we can actually program these within your automated messages to where Schlage will change that code every single time a guest checks in. And then it will disable it when they check out, and it will automatically put that new code in those check-in instructions. This way you're not having to program the code and then send it to the guest automatically. It's also going to allow you to remotely manage entry. So if you need to let in, let's say, a maintenance guy or a contractor, this is going to allow you to do so from your phone. You can also program contractor codes. So my cleaners have their own code. My maintenance guy has their own code. I can do a temporary code. Let's say I've got a carpet cleaning company coming, one day where I don't have a guest. Well, I can just go ahead and program a code and make it only available for like a 2-hour window. And then you can actually see the log and the history, when your team members were in there and did they lock up. Smart locks just in general are also going to help you eliminate key exchanges or lockbox hassles. I still have a lockbox with the key for a backup, but even if you didn't use all the automations and like the smart tech, just even a single code is going to make it to where you don't have a key that you need to meet and hand the guest every time they check in. Cool. And then lastly is going to be just on-demand operations. I thought I'd throw this in there because, again, this is especially important if you're managing remote. Thumbtack and TaskRabbit. So this is going to be a software that you can use to find handyman or help when you're setting up your property. So let's say you're ordering your furniture, and whether it's remote or not, if you want someone to be there to help you, put together the beds and the nightstands and the dressers and, hang your curtains, there is a category on Thumbtack and TaskRabbit for just furniture assembly. So these are going to be guys that literally all they do all day, every day is assemble furniture. And they're going to be extremely efficient. So they can help you actually put together your Airbnb. But then you can also find electricians and plumbers and maintenance guys on these apps as well. So, it's going to be great for, finding those remote workers, especially if you're in a market that you don't live or have a bunch of contacts in. I also like that they're just vetted and you can see their reviews. And a lot of times if they've taken the time to, sign up with one of these platforms, they're going to be tech, savvy. So they can help you with your cameras and your smart locks and your noise monitor. And they're just going to be more reputable individuals than, if you just kind of got like a word of mouth referral for a guy that sometimes does maintenance from your realtor, when you closed on that property. And you can get fast access to them too. A lot of times you jump on one of these apps, you plug in what you're looking for, you can get a same day or next day person out there. So it might not be, useful for if you have like an emergency. In that case, I would just Google, 24/7 electrician. But if you've got something that you can schedule out for just kind of random projects, Thumbtack and TaskRabbit's going to be a great solution for you. So each of these tools is going to solve a specific problem, whether it's pricing to cleaning to maintenance. And this is going to allow you to run a large portfolio without losing your nights and weekends. And this is what helps me run a large portfolio without losing my nights and weekends. So if you're serious about growing your Airbnb business, I'd recommend you don't do it manually and take advantage of some of these tools and softwares out there that will actually help you move the needle in the right direction. And if you want help actually setting up these tools within your own portfolio or help finding and launching your first Airbnb, I'll put a link in the description below. Just book that free deal planning call, and we look forward to connecting with you.